Okay, we're going to get started because we only have a half hour. And I want to welcome Tori Cordiano. She's a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in the emotional, psychological, and behavioral development of children and adolescents. And Tori, we really value your input. You have this very wonderful advice in this gentle packaging that is, it's just encouraging and inspiring. And so thank you for being here with us today. We are from Your Teen Media. I'm Sue Borison, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm Jen Pro. I'm one of the editors at Your Teen Magazine, and it's my honor to be with you all today. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Jody Podl. I also am working with Your Teen Magazine, and very excited to be here. I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, one of the perks of being an editor at Your Teen is that we get all of our questions answered by experts.
And then just to give you some housekeeping, we're going to answer your questions, so put them in the chat. If you have any technical difficulties, go into the chat. We have Jessica Port standing by to help all of you if there's any technical difficulties. The chat on your computer, if you scroll to the bottom, you should see it on the right. And then on your phone, if you tap on it, and your iPad, you should see 3 dots that say more. Click on that and you'll see the option for chat. So please share your questions. We'll get them answered as much as we can. So Tori, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. This is great.
And today we're going to start with our questions that we've kind of talked about in advance. And one of the things that I've been hearing from the other interviews I've been doing is that parents are starting to squabble now. Mm-hmm. And so can you address that for us?
Yeah. So I think, as I was thinking about this and just living in our house this morning, I was coming back to the word grace, and Sue, you and I talked about this before, but I feel like the further we get into this, the more we need to remind ourselves of that we're all going to start to unravel in different ways as this unfolds. And probably the best case scenario is that my unraveling is on an opposite day as my husband's unraveling, but that's not always the case. So, you're going to have those moments, those days where it feels like everyone's at their peak of tension at the same time. And it might be you and your partner, it might be you and your kids, it might be all of the whole house together. And if anyone in that grouping of either of the parents is able to just sort of have a little bit of awareness in that moment and say like, we are all we're all getting real hot at the same time. Let's press pause, let's walk away. And to just kind of expect that even if that works great in regular everyday life, that it might be more challenging to do that under these circumstances. But if anyone is even able just to kind of put up a hand or to say like, pause, time out, let's give this a minute. You may need to come back to the conversation. You may, as we're discovering in our house, 9 times out of 10, it's not something that anyone needs or wants to come back to. It's something that just got heated in the moment. And if you're able to press pause on it, it often kind of loses some of its steam on its own. Part of the difficulty with that is we're all in such tight space right now. So if you're able to even say like, let's get outside for 5 minutes and do something physical, this is not exclusive to small kids. You can have a freeze tag game with your college age students, and everyone can kind of get out some physical energy. It's a nice antidote to being just stuck in the same small physical space together for so much time.
Yeah, I just want to say that happened yesterday in my house. I was losing it, and I finally just looked up and I said, you know what? I need to go in the other room where the orchid is and have a little moment to myself before I can talk to you. And then, it might have been longer than a little moment, but
bonus points to like look at something beautiful or get some fresh air or something kind of sensory, if it's fresh air on your skin, if it's sunshine, if it's running around, if it's looking at something, smelling something good, something that kind of grounds you a little bit. I think there's bonus points for that.
So
Jen?
So I have a friend who asked me to ask this question on her behalf. She said, I'm seeing all this great advice for parents about how to handle things with their kids, being stuck at home with them. And she said, the problem I have is that my husband and I both have to work. They're required workers. They have a teenager who's at home and a younger kid with the teen. And, what can they do to keep them engaged, keep them on track? she actually got kind of like a nasty gram from one of the neighbors who said, hey, your kid's out front with other kids and they're playing and they're too close. They're not maintaining social distance that we agreed on. And she's stuck at work, so she can't really monitor this and get, tag in.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for parents who are having to do this remote thing remotely?
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so tough. Yeah. And if you're lucky enough to have a teenager or a young adult child who's home, it can help with the childcare. That's great. Not every family has that situation right now. But if you have that, I think it's important to really think collaborative with your older kids about, okay, unfortunately, you're sort of thrust into the role of helper here. It wasn't something you asked for, and we so appreciate you stepping up. The nice part is it taps into adolescents' sense of purpose if they can be helpful and see the bigger picture of, this is how I'm contributing. I'm contributing, even though it's not my ideal scenario and maybe my friends aren't having to do it, I'm contributing by watching my younger siblings so that you can go to work and be on the front lines in whatever that way that is. If it's, stocking grocery store shelves, or if it's working in a lab or being in a hospital or whatever it is. And then once you've got that collaborative spirit in place with your older child, to kind of have it can be very quick. Maybe it's at night before you go to bed. Maybe it's in the morning before you leave for work, of a 5-minute kind of check-in of, all right, here's our expectations. Here's what I'm expecting. What are you expecting? What do you need from us if we're at work? Is it helpful for us to plan to FaceTime at noon? Is it helpful for me to, get lunch ready, or do you want to be in charge of that? And to truly come at it from a collaborative spirit. If you're expecting your teenager or your young adult to step up and help, which is just part of the expectation right now, you also have to expect that it's going to be a collaborative work in process.
Bummer. Okay, so we have a question from Helen, who says that her 13-year-old is, is losing motivation from schoolwork. Yeah.
Yeah.
So any really good tips there?
Yep. Yeah. I would say I'm losing motivation for teaching my kids the schoolwork. Yeah. So I think that, we're all going to run into this in the best. I've heard from so many kids and teenagers over the last couple of weeks that like all the stuff that makes school fun isn't there right now. Right. So like school is fun and bearable because it's not just sitting and doing schoolwork for hours a day. You're with your friends, you're moving around, you're engaged in discussion. And a lot of what we have right now is just the sort of drudgery of it. And that's not to say that teachers are not going above and beyond to be creative, enthusiastic, and connect, but without being there in person, you're just missing some of what makes school so fun for kids for whom it feels fun. So the first step might be just acknowledging that with your kids and your teenagers of like, I am not surprised that you're losing motivation. I'm surprised that it took this long, that, that sitting here and doing this work isn't fun. It's not motivating. Yeah, absolutely. And then to bring it back to the basics of, on those days where the motivation is low, what absolutely has to get done? And it's probably not a whole lot, right? These are not the days to go above and beyond, to do the extra projects that the teachers are recommending, to bring it back down to like bare bones basics. And then to think about, how do we make that more tolerable? I talked with a kiddo the other day who said she's doing some of her work outside when she can. She's going to go in her yard and do a little bit of work that way. Does it help to have music on? Do you need to be in your own space? Do you need to be in a communal space? How much time is reasonable for you to be working at a time? It's probably not going to be an hour and a half. It's probably going to be more like 25 minutes. And then let's have a get up and move break. But I think collaboration is the word that I keep coming back to here. But to sit with your teenager and think about, what is that going to look like day to day? And to also remember that it might not be what your teenager typically looks like in her daily life, right? These are unusual circumstances. So what was working for her back in January might not be what's working for her right now when she's working at home.
Yeah, I think that, that whole thing about managing our expectations ties in here, and realizing that, less is more in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a teacher, and she can't get access to books, but she needs to find another. And like, well, maybe they could all pick their own that they want to read, so that they have like you were talking about, so they have skin in the game and a vested interest. Yeah. So it's kind of combining, but it's just so hard. But
yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah, and it's the same is true for my college kids too. So it's not just a younger kid problem. This
Mm-hmm.
motivation is, and maybe to make this even a little bit worse, some of the college kids, their colleges have given them the option to take classes pass fail because they know they're not delivering the same level of instruction. Yeah. That just like sucked motivation out of them. Like, oh, well, I'm just going to pass fail it then, because I'm not getting anything out of this. So I feel like that was just such a self-defeating type thing for them to put out there. I understand why they did it, and maybe that was the right thing, but it's like there's like this much motivation.
Yeah.
So, so Claudia is curious. She sounds like her kid is having a very hard time in keeping like any positive outlook on the world, worried about losing family members, worrying about future, like very existential worries.
Yeah.
I imagine there are many kids who are feeling that way right now. What do we say to them?
Yeah. So I think my answer to that is twofold. The first is that as parents, we can be quick to jump in and try to fix, or to try to provide here's the positive. Let's look for the helpers. Let's look for the silver lining. What are the things we'll take away from this? And yes, that's all true if you're in the right frame of mind to be able to accept that. But if you're not, it can feel like, boy, you're not even getting how I feel in this. You're not getting how worried I am about this. So before we can move to any of that, any of the positive outlook, we need to actually be with our kids in that discomfort, in that uncertainty, and to say, yeah, this is really hard because as adults, I think we have an understanding that this is all hard for everybody. This is hard for everybody in different ways, but nobody's getting off easy right now. Kids don't have that same perspective. They don't have that same realization that everybody is experiencing this difficulty in different ways and in different levels of it, but everyone's having a hard time. So they may feel sort of like, what's wrong with me that this is so hard for me? So they need even teenagers will feel this way. They need some kind of just sitting in it with parents and saying like, yeah, it's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because you're doing anything wrong. And then if they're open to it, you can say, sometimes it helps to look for the helpers, to look for the bright spots, the stories. And there's all kinds of good stories that are coming up, and you don't have to look too hard to find them in your own neighborhood or on the internet, but to find some of those bright spots. And then the other piece of it is, when we're not taking good care of ourselves, we're not able to think beyond that existential dread, that the only the negative parts of it. So it might not be so much about finding the positive, but it might be about, okay, so that it's a mess right now, and it's hard and it's uncertain and it's really difficult. But what are the things that you can manage, and to bring that back down to the basics again? For me as an adult, what I'm thinking about is I actually wrote it on a Post-it. It's on my computer here. You can see it. So I did the acronym CASE, which makes me smile because Case Western is my alma mater. But for me, it's like, okay, these are the 4 things that I have to connect. I have to connect with people, with things that help me feel good. I'm practicing acceptance. I am accepting that I can't control a lot of this, and I'm letting go of the idea that I can do things to fix this for my kids and for my practice and, for the world. I am really working hard on self-care. So moving my body, getting enough sleep. Because if you have teenagers, maybe they're sleeping late. The little kids are still up at 6:30. I'm here to tell you, they're ready to go at 6:30 in the morning. And then the E is that I have empathy, and I'm working really hard to grant empathy to myself and to grant empathy to everybody right now, to my family members, to the teenagers that I work with in my practice, to colleagues, to people online who are being snarky, and just granting some empathy of like, if you're really scared, it's easy to be snarky. It's easy to lash out. So to find what are like the basic things that are going to allow you to feel your best, then you can start to think about the positives.
So tell us that one more time. CASE stands for connect.
Yeah, so it's CASE, C-A-S-E. So for me, and this is mine, yours will be different, but for mine, it's connection. So it might be with people, it might be with good books, it might be with things that are just, I have a sense of connection to. The A is for acceptance, that I'm accepting I cannot change a whole lot about these circumstances. I can work with my small corner of the world, but I can accept that this is just hard. The S is self-care. So it is moving my body, eating food that helps me feel good, getting enough sleep. And then the E is empathy for myself and for other people.
That's beautiful. I'm making that mine now. Is that okay?
Sure.
Did you go to CASE?
I did actually.
Yeah.
Okay, then it can be yours.
Yeah.
Mine too. Okay, so Joni, and I think there's a number of people saying things like this, are talking about kids who are missing their friends but aren't reaching out.
Yeah.
So they're living without the opportunities that other people are finding of connecting virtually. How do you encourage a kid to do something differently?
Yeah. A lot of it, I think it's at that place of like when you're ready to do it, but continuing to put it in front of your kid in small ways of, if they're able to say, I'm missing my friends, you can say, yeah, it's so hard. And it's not the same to FaceTime with your friends or to Zoom with them. It's not the same. I get that. But if you're really feeling low, maybe we give it a try. Would it be worth it to check in? Some schools are having more formal kind of check-ins, and I see for the kids that have that, they're getting a little boost in their mood. And if your teenager is open to hearing you say, when I checked in with my friends, I wasn't, optimistic about how it was going to go. I didn't know how I would feel about it, but turns out it helped and I felt good. If they're open to hearing that maybe let's try it and see how it goes. To continue to put it in front of them as an option. But if they're not ready to do it or to take that option to be okay with, they might not be there yet.
I have one bit of advice to jump in with here based on my own experience with my kids. If you have a kid who's not really typically comfortable with a lot of face-to-face interaction with peers, they're more into like what we used to call parallel play when they were toddlers.
Yeah.
There are some options for that. And one of them that my kids have both enjoyed is doing a Netflix watch party where they can watch a movie together, but then use the chat bar to kind of talk with each other back and forth about the movie. So it's like less, you don't have to have that direct contact, that direct eye contact, but you can be with your friends in a fun way and do something that's just a little bit little lower barrier to entry if you have that option. If you have,
I love that. That's a great, it's just that sense of like being with your people, right? Whether with is like you're across the street and I'm over here and we're taking a walk, or with is the Netflix watch party or FaceTime or whatever. I love that idea.
Yeah, I read something too yesterday about how kids were just kind of opening up their computers and doing homework. It was like at this, at the same time. So it was the same thing where they're kind of just like, hey, what are you doing now or whatever. So they didn't have to chat or interact the whole time, but it was just the like feeling like, okay, well, there's somebody else here and we're doing the same thing. And that was just a big win. So
yeah.
So
that
there's
together
a whole
while
other line of I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just said the together while apart. Yeah, it's we need to keep coming back to it.
So there's another line of worry, which is like the kids who are just not getting out of bed, not doing anything. And as parents, we want to keep encouraging. So that creates a whole different set of tension. What do we do? I mean, do we worry about like clinical depression at this moment? What do we do?
Yeah. So I think, there's that like kind of when to worry line that we're walking over. And if it's a couple of days, or if it's like, for the most part, we're doing okay, but 20% of the time it's like, I can't, get her up and she's not real motivated to do much. That may be the reality of the circumstances, and the job of parents is to monitor it and make sure it's not getting worse, and to provide support and help and options where we can. If you're feeling like it's getting to the place where, gosh, nothing we're doing is working, she's not able to get up, she's not able to get out of bed or engage, the channels of support are still available, and many of them are remote. But, Sue, you and I were talking about this. Therapists are still seeing clients, are taking new clients. Physicians are connecting. A good first stop is your general physician, your family physician. They are still available. They still want families to check in. Your school counselor. Think about like if this was real life and you were worried about your kid being depressed, who would be the people you would check in with? And though it's not the same because you can't be one-on-one, those sources are still available and still ready to help.
I saw that somebody in the chat bar said they have a teenage nephew who does struggle with depression, and they're really having a hard time. He's having a hard time being isolated at home, and they want to know what they can do to help, because they would normally connect more. So what do you do with a situation like that?
Yeah, I was talking to a teenager the other day, and I said, this is sort of like a really nasty social experiment for people who are anxious and depressed. Like, let's take away everything. Let's take away the routine. Let's take away your ability to be with people. Let's take away like stuff you can control, and then let's just see what happens. And it's allowing people to be really creative in how they're accessing support. So, some conversations with teenagers about, okay, so, and especially this can actually be helpful for teenagers who already have the diagnosis of depression or anxiety and have some sense of what helps them to feel good, to say, we have to be extra careful. So certain people in the situation have to be extra careful because perhaps they have asthma, or, they're immunocompromised, and their form of extra careful is extremely being very cautious about exposure to this virus. For people who are depressed and anxious, they need to be extra careful in another way. And that extra careful looks like taking really good care of themselves, getting out and doing the things that they know will help. So getting outside, staying up to date with their assignments, their schoolwork, using what we call behavioral activation, which is setting things. And it could be like, I get up, I make breakfast, I, make my bed. We're not talking about, this is low hanging fruit here, but having a schedule for the day that allows them to keep going. Those are the ways that people who are anxious and depressed need to be extra careful right now, because they're going to be susceptible to other parts of this quarantine and this virus.
So thank you. One mom has a question. She has an only child, a trans boy, 13 years old, not too many friends at school, but a good community of friends online. Should I be encouraging him to be more in touch with schoolmates or just leave it alone?
I think you do what's working. And if he's got a good community of friends online and that's a supportive place right now, use that. For kids who have that and who already had that established, a nice part about this is that hasn't changed. They can still access that support and their friends in that way. If there are, for kids for whom they weren't super connected at school, but even if they have like a friend or two or a teacher or two that they were connected to think about how to keep them in touch with those more sort of in their neighborhood friends, so they're not losing complete touch with what's going on. But I think for kids, finding the support where it is and accessing, being comfortable with where it is, if it's mostly online, that's okay.
So this is a question from Pam, and we get this all the time from people who things seem to be going well, and we have this fear that we're missing something. Everyone's talking about what they're worried about.
Yeah.
And if the kids seem like they're navigating this okay, what should you worry about worrying about?
Yeah. That's such a parent thing, right? Like, what am I not worried about right now? Yeah. So an interesting part of this is that some kids are actually feeling a lot of stress relief right now. So for kids for whom school was not a happy place, or it felt really hard, or the social dynamics were really sticky, or who, for many, many reasons, maybe academically things felt really tough. There's a pocket of kids right now who are really almost thriving in this because of the break from that traditional routine. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to continue. At different parts, it's going to pop up in different ways. And even for kids who are feeling less anxious or less depressed than they were before, there's going to be moments, of course, where it hits them and it's harder. And we address that when it comes up. But if your kid is doing okay with this, that's not outside the norm. There are plenty of kids who are actually kind of thriving, being at home, having less on their plate, being around family, getting to take a break from some of their really super rigorous schedule that had been in place.
I don't know if people are seeing, but there was one pickleball suggestion of ordering it online and putting it on the driveway, and it's created tons of fun for their kids. I'm going to get that one. So
I love that.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And I've seen people talk about it, even the ping pong table. Like if you don't have an actual one, they're the things that you can get, like that you can put on a table and play ping pong with it. So.
Yep. Yeah. That's super creative. Yeah. We've been doing a lot of puzzling in our house, like real into the puzzles lately. Yeah.
So.
Okay. A 17-year-old who wants to have Zoom with friends, but the friends are drinking while they're doing Zoom, like a happy hour. They're like mimicking what the parents are doing. And, these are unusual times.
They are.
What do you say to that?
Yeah.
Teens are going to be teens, right? They got to always find a way to
push. I mean, they're going to find ways, right? They're going to find ways to push buttons. I think you can control what you can control, right? And the reality of is if your 17-year-old is in your house and she's Zooming with her friends who are drinking and she's safe, right? She's following the rules. And to cut her off from contact with her friends who aren't making good choices feels unfair and punitive if she's following the rules and she needs to connect with her friends. I think that, there is, I think there's something to be said about, Sue, what you said about teenagers mimicking what the parents are doing. There's a little bit of a culture right now of, we're stuck at home and we're all drinking early in the day and, we're using this to cope and get through. And I don't think it's ill-intentioned at all, but as a clinician, I see that and I cringe. And I want us to be mindful of how that feels for people who really truly struggle with substance use, for people who are on the cusp of that, for people whose teens may struggle with that, to be mindful of the ways that we are coping and that our teens are not shielded from that, whether we're doing it ourselves or we're talking about it or we're endorsing it, in other people who are doing it, that coping through substances is not going to be a healthy way to get through this.
So just to add one component, this daughter, excuse me, she would like to participate.
Oh,
No.
no. Yeah. Okay. So this is an important point. The boundaries still have to be in place. You know, we can be flexible where it makes sense to be flexible. Bedtimes, yes, be flexible. How you do your work, be flexible all day long. Drinking at 17, if you're not usually okay with drinking at 17, and it is in fact illegal, you can't suddenly be okay with drinking at 17. The boundaries that we have in place for teenagers that have to do with their safety, with their well-being, their developing of good coping skills, those have to stay in place. And in fact, it's going to feel super weird for the teenagers if those boundaries start to go out the window. This feeling of like there needs to be some semblance of normalcy. Normalcy means those boundaries that keep you safe are always going to be there. We're not going to say those now go by the wayside.
I love that comment because, you know, they might still be mad at us and they might still roll their eyes and try to get away with it, but we are creating a safe environment for them by saying what we always said, no.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even with everything that's inconsistent and uncertain, parents can be that consistent place that they have always been and will always continue to be.
Okay, we're going to do one last quick thing. If everybody goes to chat, puts their hand on the keyboard, and all at once, I want everyone to write one win of the last week. Something that inspired you or surprised you, just put it in the chat.
Oh, these are good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
the
it.
chalk
cutting
art.
hair. We had a failure with cutting
Never
hair.
rushing family.
Gosh, the never rushing.
Baking.
That's so true.
I know.
Hug.
Oh,
congratulations.
Delivered a
congratulations.
beautiful baby via surrogacy.
Oh, that's incredible.
Zoom tea
Oh,
party.
kids getting along. My kids
That's
are getting
amazing.
Oh,
along.
family
All
Like
four kids playing
rides.
together. Wow. Bear hunts.
Love it. Sleep, right? We're probably all getting more of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay.
That's because I'm
These
trying
are
to.
really good.
Yeah,
These are
awesome.
really good.
These are
This
great.
is amazing. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Dr. Tori Cordiano.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for having me. This was really great.
And we're going to do one a week. So we will let you know. I would say if you want to get a notification, go to yourteenmag.com/sign-up and get on our newsletter. And that way you'll know every time we're doing something like this so you can get on and get more great advice. Thank you so much, Tori.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tori.
Thank you.